The first 30 seconds after you get out of bed, that is the window this video is about. The feet hit the floor and the body needs a moment before it agrees to move properly. The hips are reluctant. The knees take a second to load. The hands, if you reach for something, feel thick and slow, and then gradually things loosen. The body warms up. Most people walk that off within 10 or 15 minutes and consider the matter closed. What they do not consider is what is causing it, and what is making it worse, quietly, every single night while they sleep. Morning stiffness is not random. It is the predictable result of inflammatory compounds, proteins and acids that accumulate in and around your joints during the hours you are lying still, building up overnight without the movement and circulation that would normally clear them. Your body produces these compounds as part of its natural repair process. The problem is that after 60, the clearance mechanism slows. The compounds linger longer. The window of stiffness stretches. And if nothing intervenes, the trend is in one direction. Think about what that means for this week. Not 10 years from now, but this week. The morning walk you have skipped 3 times because the first 10 minutes feel like too high a price. The jar you handed to someone else without saying why. The drive you delayed because getting in and out of the car before the body loosens is not worth the trip. These are not dramatic losses. They are small, daily, invisible concessions. And they are accumulating. Stiffness that takes 15 minutes to clear becomes 20. 20 becomes 40. And one morning, you realize that you have quietly rearranged your life around the first hour of your day. Ayurvedic physicians in India have addressed morning joint stiffness for over 3,000 years. They called it ama, the accumulation of uncleared metabolic waste in the body's channels. And their primary interventions were not applied to the joints directly. They were applied to what a person consumed before, during, and immediately after waking. The logic was precise. If the problem is accumulation, the solution is clearance. And clearance, they understood, begins in the gut and the bloodstream long before it reaches the joint. Modern research has arrived at a remarkably similar conclusion through an entirely different route. The drinks that most effectively reduce morning stiffness in adults over 60 are not the ones acting on the joint itself. They are the ones that reduce the inflammatory load the joint is swimming in overnight. That distinction is everything. And it is why a single cup consumed consistently can begin shifting that load within 72 hours. Not eliminate it, shift it. The 3-day mark is when the underlying mechanism first becomes measurable. And for many people, that is exactly when they begin to notice the difference in those first 30 seconds off the bed. Before we get to the full list, one drink in particular deserves a flag. A clinical trial conducted in Scandinavia, studying a specific compound found in one common plant, produced a reduction in morning stiffness scores in adults over 60 that surprised the researchers enough to prompt a follow-up study. We will get to that research in full at the end. But first, 7 drinks and the mechanisms behind each one. Leave a comment and tell me your age and where you are watching from. Let us begin. Number 1, tart cherry juice. Most people think of joint stiffness as a structural problem. Worn cartilage, bone rubbing on bone, damage that accumulates over decades. And for some people, that is part of it. But the reason the stiffness is worst in the morning specifically, not midday, not after a walk, but in those first minutes after lying still for 8 hours, points to something different. It points to chemistry, not structure. And tart cherry juice addresses that chemistry directly. Tart cherries contain some of the highest concentrations of anthocyanins found in any commonly eaten fruit. These compounds do 2 things relevant to morning stiffness. First, they inhibit the same inflammatory enzymes, COX-1 and COX-2, that over-the-counter pain medications target. Second, and less well known, they lower uric acid levels in the blood. Uric acid, when elevated, forms microscopic crystals that deposit in joint spaces and trigger an intense, local inflammatory response overnight, precisely when the body is still and clearance is slowest. Tart cherry reduces the concentration of those crystals before they accumulate. Less accumulation overnight means less to clear in the morning. Drink 250 milliliters of pure tart cherry juice daily, not sweet cherry and not a cocktail blend. Morning is the optimal time. If you find the tartness difficult, dilute it slightly with water. Avoid versions with added sugar, which will counteract the anti-inflammatory benefit. Number 2, ginger water. Tart cherry reduces the uric acid and inflammatory proteins already present in the joint space. Ginger works one step earlier in that process, at the point where the inflammatory signal is first produced. The active compounds in ginger, gingerols, and shogalls block the production of prostaglandins, the signaling molecules that instruct the body to mount an inflammatory response. If tart cherry is cleanup, ginger is prevention. It interrupts the signal before the inflammation is dispatched. For morning stiffness specifically, this means that the overnight accumulation the body would normally trigger has less fuel to build from in the first place. Ayurvedic morning protocols have centered ginger for precisely this reason for thousands of years. The traditional preparation, fresh ginger steeped in warm water, consumed first thing upon waking before food, was understood to prepare the body's channels for the day. What that tradition was observing, without the language of prostaglandins, was a genuine suppression of the inflammatory cascade at its source. Slice 4 to 5 coins of fresh ginger and steep them in 300 milliliters of hot water for 8 minutes. Drink it warm, first thing in the morning before breakfast. A small amount of honey is acceptable. If you are on blood-thinning medication, keep consumption to 1 cup daily and mention it to your doctor. Number 3, pineapple juice. Where ginger prevents the inflammatory signal from being sent, pineapple juice addresses what happens when some inflammation gets through anyway, as it always does. The mechanism here is an enzyme called bromelain, found almost exclusively in pineapple and particularly concentrated in fresh pineapple juice. Bromelain is a protein-dissolving enzyme found almost exclusively in pineapple. Specifically, it breaks down the sticky protein debris, the clotting compounds and inflammatory residue that accumulate in joint fluid during periods of inactivity. Think of it as a natural solvent for the overnight buildup that ginger did not fully prevent. This is why pineapple has been used in post-surgical recovery protocols in several countries, not for its vitamin C, but for bromelain's ability to clear inflammatory debris from tissue. The contrast with ginger here matters. Ginger is upstream, it reduces production. Bromelain is downstream, it accelerates clearance. Used together, they cover both ends of the same process. Fresh pineapple juice contains significantly more active bromelain than processed or pasteurized versions, as heat degrades the enzyme. Drink 200 milliliters of fresh juice in the morning, ideally 30 minutes after your ginger water rather than simultaneously, to give each compound space to act. If you take blood thinners or have a bleeding disorder, speak with your doctor first. Bromelain has mild anticoagulant properties. The first 3 drinks on this list are all working on the inflammatory load in and around the joint. What comes next shifts the focus slightly, from the environment the joint is swimming in to the structural material the joint itself is made of. That distinction opens a different part of the conversation entirely. Number 4, bone broth. Cartilage does not have its own blood supply. Unlike muscle or bone, it cannot pull nutrients directly from the bloodstream. Instead, it absorbs what it needs from the fluid surrounding the joint, through compression and release, the way a sponge draws in water. Every time you move, the joint squeezes that fluid in and out, and the cartilage takes what it needs. When you are still for 8 hours, that exchange stops. And if the materials the cartilage needs are not present in the fluid to begin with, no amount of movement will compensate. Bone broth supplies 3 of those raw materials directly: collagen peptides, glucosamine, and chondroitin, the structural proteins and compounds that cartilage is largely built from. When you consume them in liquid form, they are absorbed through the gut and circulate in the bloodstream, making them available to the joint fluid through that diffusion process. You are not rebuilding cartilage overnight. but you are ensuring the materials needed for ongoing maintenance are present and accessible. This is where bone broth differs from turmeric, which we will reach shortly. Bone broth is supply. It provides what the joint needs to maintain itself. Turmeric addresses whether the inflammatory conditions in the joint will allow that maintenance to actually take place. Both matter, but they are answering different questions. Drink 1 cup of warm bone broth daily, ideally in the morning or early evening. Choose a broth that has been slow simmered for a minimum of 8 hours. This is what draws the collagen and minerals from the bones into the liquid. Most commercial carton broths are under-simmered and nutritionally thin. Look for one that gels when refrigerated. That is the collagen content you are after. Number 5, green tea. There is a specific enzyme that quietly accelerates the breakdown of cartilage in aging joints. It is called MMP13, a matrix metalloproteinase, and its activity increases with age and with chronic low-grade inflammation. Most people have never heard of it, but it is one of the primary drivers of the structural deterioration that makes morning stiffness progressively worse over time rather than staying constant. Green tea's primary active compound, EGCG, directly inhibits MMP13. This is distinct from everything the previous 4 drinks have done. Tart cherry and ginger and pineapple are addressing the inflammatory load in the joint environment. Bone broth is supplying structural materials. Green tea is protecting the structure itself from enzymatic erosion, a third and separate layer of the problem. A clinical trial examining EGCG's effect on joint tissue found that consistent daily consumption measurably reduced MMP13 activity in study participants over a 12-week period. The cartilage was not regenerating, but the rate at which it was being broken down slowed significantly. For morning stiffness, this matters because less structural degradation means less jagged surface area in the joint and less surface irritation overnight. 1 to 2 cups of green tea daily, brewed at around 80 degrees Celsius for 2 to 3 minutes. Do not overbrew. Bitterness increases and catechin quality drops. Morning or midday is ideal. If you are on blood-thinning medication, keep it to 1 cup and mention it to your doctor. Number 6, turmeric latte. Bone broth gives the joint what it needs to maintain itself. Green tea slows the enzymatic process that undermines that maintenance. Turmeric addresses the third obstacle, the chronic low-grade inflammation in the joint lining that creates the hostile environment making repair difficult in the first place. Curcumin, the active compound in turmeric, suppresses a signaling molecule called NF-κB, the master switch that activates the body's inflammatory response in joint tissue. When that switch is chronically overactive, as it tends to be in adults over 60 with persistent morning stiffness, the joint lining stays in a low-level state of alert that prevents the recovery that should be happening during sleep. Curcumin dials that switch back. The joint lining calms. The overnight environment becomes less hostile, and the inflammatory buildup that produces morning stiffness has less fuel to accumulate from. The absorption challenge with curcumin is real and worth taking seriously. On its own, it passes through the digestive system largely unused. 2 things change that. Black pepper, which contains piperine and increases curcumin absorption dramatically, and a fat source, since curcumin is fat-soluble. A turmeric latte, warm milk, 1 teaspoon of turmeric, a pinch of black pepper, a small amount of coconut oil or ghee, delivers all 3 together. Drink it in the evening, roughly an hour before bed, so curcumin is circulating during the overnight hours when the inflammatory accumulation is actually occurring. That timing is not incidental. It is the point. 6 drinks in. Inflammation intercepted at the signal level, at the debris level, and at the overnight environment level. Structural materials supplied. Enzymatic erosion slowed. What remains is the 1 drink that addresses a mechanism none of the others touch, and does so with clinical evidence specific to morning stiffness in adults over 60 that is genuinely difficult to dismiss. Number 7, rosehip tea. Rosehip, the small red fruit that appears on rose bushes after the flowers have died. Most people who know it at all associate it with vitamin C, a wartime supplement, a grandmother's remedy, something pleasantly old-fashioned. The idea that it is sitting at the end of a list that includes clinical-grade anti-inflammatory compounds and enzymatic inhibitors will strike some people as a step backwards. That reaction is understandable. It is also exactly what the research does not support. Rosehip contains a compound called GOPO, a galactolipid, meaning a fat molecule bonded to a sugar, that is not found in meaningful quantities in any other commonly consumed food or drink. GOPO does not work through the inflammatory pathways we have discussed today. It works through a separate and more fundamental mechanism. It inhibits the migration of white blood cells into the joint space. When white blood cells accumulate in a joint overnight, drawn there by the low-grade inflammatory signals that age and inactivity generate, they release their own inflammatory compounds, compounding the overnight buildup significantly. GOPO interrupts that migration before it begins. Fewer white blood cells in the joint space means less secondary inflammation. Less secondary inflammation means less to clear when you stand up in the morning. And that is a mechanism none of the previous 6 drinks come close to touching. The Scandinavian trial flagged at the beginning of this video studied GOPO specifically. Researchers recruited 94 adults between the ages of 60 and 78, all reporting significant morning joint stiffness. Half received a standardized rosehip powder supplement daily for 3 months. The other half received a placebo. At the end of the trial, the rosehip group showed a statistically significant reduction in morning stiffness scores. Not joint pain in general, but morning stiffness specifically, measured in the first 30 minutes after waking. The finding was consistent enough that a follow-up study was commissioned. That follow-up confirmed it. The compound was real, the mechanism was documentable, and the effect was specific to the exact window this video opened with, those first 30 seconds off the bed. To get the benefit through rosehip tea, steep 1 heaped tablespoon of dried rosehips in 300 milliliters of hot water for 10 to 15 minutes. Longer steeping releases more of the lipid-soluble compounds, including GOPO. Strain carefully. The fine hairs inside rosehip shells can cause irritation if consumed. Drink 1 cup each evening, approximately an hour before sleep, so GOPO is present and circulating during the overnight hours when white blood cell migration peaks. A small amount of honey is fine. Rosehip is very well tolerated and has no significant medication interactions at normal consumption levels. It is one of the few items on this list that requires no medical caution for most people. 7 drinks, 4 distinct mechanisms. 1 window, those first 30 seconds after your feet hit the floor. What you consume in the hours before you sleep and again when you wake has more influence over that window than most people have ever been told. Full dosage details for everything on this list are in the description below. If this reached you at the right moment, share it with someone who mentions their knees before they have had their coffee, or whose first 10 minutes every morning have become something they endure rather than enjoy. That person exists in most of our lives. Leave a comment and tell me which drink you are going to try first. I read everyone, and I will see you in the next one.